Welcome to another week here. I am Sarah Maslowski with Moving to Georgia. I am a real estate agent coming to you every single week, giving you information about the North Metro Atlanta area, what it's like to live here, everything that you need to know about potentially making a move to the Metro Atlanta area. And I join you every single Wednesday, just about every single Wednesday, giving you all the latest and greatest information that you need to know about what's going on in the market and topics that you need to know right now. And today we're going to dive into some of the hidden costs that people don't tell you about whenever buying a house. So I recently had a consultation with a person just like you who might be considering making a move here to Georgia. And we talked about some of the hidden costs that you experience whenever buying a house. And it's my job to make sure that you're fully informed of everything that you could potentially experience and encounter when buying a house. And part of me being a really great agent is making sure that you know about those costs. So we are going to share that information with you so that you can use this knowledge if you're planning on buying a house or planning whether it's moving to Georgia or anywhere. A lot of these fees that you're going to incur or could possibly incur, you're going to experience that pretty much wherever you decide to buy a house. So thank you for joining me on the live stream. And if you're joining us, please make sure to let me know in the comments where you're joining us from, where you're tuning in from. It's always so fascinating to me to see all the different people that we're able to reach and talk to and connect with from all across the country and even world. So I would love to know where you're watching us from. So today's topic is all about hidden costs when buying a house. And so if you have any hidden costs that you incurred when buying a house that your agent did not tell you about, let me know in the comments. I want to see what you have experienced in the past. But before we jump into the hidden costs, there was a little bit of good news that came out of the real estate world today, or mortgage world, banking world, whatever you want to call it. And that was that the Fed decided to pause their interest rate hikes. Now, the Fed rate is not directly, literally tied to mortgage interest rates, but they are connected in some ways. So the good news is that we have gotten some good indicators with the inflation that the Fed is trying to combat, that things are working a little bit. And so the Fed has been increasing the Fed funds rate, and they recently announced that they were going to pause that Fed funds rate increase, which correlates somewhat directly to mortgage interest rates as well. So I'm going to share with you an article that talks a little bit more about this. Let me pull that up for you. Okay. So this was an article shared on Realtor.com. It says the Fed just gave the housing market a break. Mortgage rates are poised to fall by this much. And this is key here. So if you are planning on buying a home this year, this is something that you're going to want to pay attention to. And it's conversations that I have with people just like you all the time, potential clients saying like, hey, what do you think interest rates are going to do? And should I wait to buy a house? I keep hearing that interest rates are going to drop. So it said that the Fed held interest rates steady on Wednesday, declining to jack them up higher this month in its fight to tame inflation. It says that's expected to nudge mortgage rates down a little by year's end. And so I think it's really key that we focus on nudge mortgage interest rates down a little. So we're not expecting to experience kind of like a drastic rate drop this year. We are expecting that to be a little bit of a decline. So Realtor's chief economist Danielle Hale said that mortgage rates have likely peaked. So that is some good news, right? We saw interest rates almost at 7% this year. And she goes on to say, but we're not going to see sudden or sharp decline. It's going to be gradual. So little by little by little, they're going to keep nudging them down, hopefully. It says by year's end, mortgage rates nationally could drop to the low 6% range. So right now they're kind of hovering in the mid sixes, 6.6, 6.7%. And so if we can get them down in the low 6 range, that would be great. And here's the key factor: as long as inflation continues to slow. And she says that she's predicting that the interest rates will head back down to around 5% over the next few years. So it could take us several years to get back into the fives and mid fives or low fives. That's going to be something that's going to slowly happen over time. And it's not going to be a sudden change in interest rate. So if you're a buyer and you're thinking about making a move and you're waiting for interest rates to drop, just know that it could be years before we see them comfortably kind of settle back down into the 5% range. And prices in the meantime are going to continue to increase. Maybe not as strongly as what we've seen over the past couple of years, but that is definitely something that you want to keep in mind. As of Wednesday, mortgage rates averaged 6.95%, but they were at 6.71% at the week ending in June 8th. So mortgage rates are fluctuating, and that's a little bit frustrating right now. And it's something that you need to be mindful of if you are in the market currently right now trying to find a home to buy and you have not yet locked in a rate. That is something that's important to know. So the good news is that slowing inflation likely helps the Fed decide against jacking up interest rates any further. It goes on to explain what the inflation rate is doing. And you need to know that the cost of housing, which makes up about a third of the goods and services that are used to measure inflation, is expected to come down this year in some areas. Now, I would say that in the metro Atlanta area, we are not seeing hardly any price declines. Now, that's the actual decline in the valuation of the house. You do sometimes still see price decreases in homes, and that's because people have just overpriced their house to begin with. And so that is still happening. And I have a really interesting story to share with you. So I recently went on a listing appointment for a potential client who had a house to sell. And, part of my job as a real estate agent is to look at comparable sales and to see what homes have sold for in the neighborhood that are similar to the house that someone is potentially wanting to sell. So all my data kind of indicated, based upon the age of this home and the condition of this home, this house needed to be priced in the mid 700s, maybe high 700s, but that was a stretch. And so when I met with this seller to talk to them about pricing their house, and they told me that they were expecting to price their home with something that started with an 8, I strongly told them that I felt like that was a big mistake. And, here's all the evidence of why. Here's comparable home sales. And as I was looking for a home for a client that I'm helping right now relocate to Georgia, I was going through the MLS system. Well, needless to say, I did not get that listing, right? That homeowner felt like their house was worth a lot more. And for me as an agent, it's not worth taking on a seller that's unrealistic about their price and that is not kind of like within the ballpark of reason. It's just not something that I want to invest my time in. So we agreed that we were not a good match for each other. So flash forward a couple weeks later, here I am searching for a house for a client, and I come across this house, y'all. So my suggested list price was between 775, 750, 775. They have this home on the market for $899. And needless to say, it's been on the market for a couple of weeks and it has not sold. So you do still see price declines in this market. And sometimes it's just because you have a very unrealistic seller of what they think they can sell their house for, despite all the best data. Or maybe they're working with an agent that just says, sure, you want to list your house for that price? Yes, let's do it. And it takes the seller a while to be on the market to realize, like, hey, we're not getting showings and we're not getting offers. I think we're overpriced. So that will be an interesting house to take a look at long term, and we'll see what happens to that one. Nichelle is watching us from Long Island, New York. Thank you for joining us. Oh, we also have Wayne from Long Island, New York. Do y'all know each other? Are you watching together? That's interesting. We've got Doug, who is moving to Georgia from Nevada. Doug, I hope we get a chance to help you. I hope I get a chance to work with you directly. I would love that and help you make that move. My contact information is directly below this video. We've got Andre is making a move from Jacksonville to Swanee, just in my backyard. We make a ton of content on Swanee. Again, we would love to work with you if you don't already have a really great agent helping you. Cindy is joining us from Jersey. Welcome, Cindy. Oh my goodness. And we have someone else watching from Long Island, New York. What's going on in Long Island, New York that's causing everyone to watch and want to move to Georgia? Let me know in the comments, because I would love to know. We help a lot of clients from New York, and that is really because most often we hear two things: the weather. Y'all are tired of the cold and tired of the prices that you pay in New York or in that area. So I know that everywhere is not New York City, but prices are high in New York, right? And so we find that we get a lot of people, a lot of clients that we end up helping from New York. We get them a lot more house for their money, and you get to enjoy the weather year round. We've had fantastic weather here in Georgia this week, unusually cooler for this time of year. There was a breeze that was happening. What's today? Today's Wednesday. This was Tuesday and Monday. And my husband and I kind of commented, we were like, gosh, this kind of feels like fall weather. But here we are in the beginning of June, middle of June now. We are in the middle of June. That is what we are in. So, yeah. So if you have any questions about making a move to Georgia or anything about the housing market, go ahead and put those in the comments, and I will answer those questions for you throughout the live stream today. And of course, I love to know where you're watching us from. So we've got a lot of people right now joining us from Long Island, New York. So welcome, welcome. Make sure you ask those questions if you have any questions. So we are going to be talking about the hidden cost of buying a home that no one tells you. And a lot of these things of what I'm going to tell you, it's not necessarily like Georgia specific. So a lot of these costs are you can experience anywhere. So if you're thinking about buying a home somewhere else, definitely make sure that these hidden costs are on your radar. So the first one I want to make sure that you know about, and that is HOA initiation fees. So if you are buying a house here in Georgia, especially the North Metro Atlanta area, you are likely going to be buying a home that is in an area with an HOA. Now, you can find houses outside of neighborhoods with an HOA, but most of your neighborhoods are going to have an HOA, and it's a great thing, right? Sometimes you're going to get really great amenities, swimming pool, tennis. Everyone's going to keep up with their yard. Home values are going to hold really steady. And this is an initiation fee that they charge one time at the very beginning whenever you purchase a house. Now, here in Georgia, we have something what we call the Community Association Disclosure. And in that Community Association Disclosure, it has to be filled out by every seller whose home is in a neighborhood with an HOA. And that disclosure is going to tell you how much the HOA fees are for the year and what those HOA fees include. And it's going to disclose whether or not there is an initiation fee or a transfer fee. Almost all HOAs charge this. And in the state of Georgia, it is something that the buyer pays for. So the HOA fee, initiation fee, usually matches what the yearly fee is. So if you're looking at an HOA that has $800 yearly charge, usually the initiation charge is $800. Now, what are they doing with that initiation fee? Are they reviewing your application? Are they doing background checks? Are they like earning that money? No, they are not earning that money. It's just, they're just collecting money because they can. And it's just become a standard accepted practice, not only here in Georgia, but also elsewhere. And so they get a chance to collect some money from you, and that's what they're doing. Really, it's just someone at the HOA management company filling out a few paperwork forms, and that's it. And they're charging you a boatload of money to do that. So definitely a frustrating fee that you experience whenever you are buying a house here in Georgia, and that is added to your closing cost. So a lot of these fees that we're going to be talking about and discussing today are things that are likely coupled in with what we call closing costs, but that's why closing costs can vary so much, is because if you're buying a home in a neighborhood with an HOA, you're collecting initiation fees, you're collecting your yearly dues, and that brings me to my next one, which is capital improvement fees. So if you're buying in a neighborhood with an HOA, sometimes the HOA can say, hey, for this year or for the next 2 years, we're going to collect an extra $1,000 from every homeowner because we want to upgrade the pool equipment, or we want to install new playground equipment. And this is something that the HOA agrees to and votes on. And this can be charged as a capital improvement fee. Again, this will be disclosed in the community association disclosure that you were provided with if they are collecting the capital improvement fee. Now, this is pretty rare in my experience. I don't have very many people that, or very many clients that have incurred a capital improvement fee, but it is something that you want to be on the lookout for. So as we're going through and we're talking about all these things, if you have any questions about making a move or anything about the housing market, please go ahead and drop those in the comments, and I will make sure that we answer those. Nichelle says that prices are very high in New York and she needs more space and needs more for my money. You can definitely find that here in Georgia. I talked to a client earlier today, someone just like y'all that are watching, that reached out from Las Vegas, Nevada. And he said that his current house was probably worth around 700 and they had 1,900 square feet. And so he was hoping to get a house here in Georgia around 2,000 square feet, between 2,000, 2,500 square feet here in Georgia for that same price point. And I had to tell him, I was like, look, no problem. You are going to experience way more square footage for that same amount of price here in Georgia that you are in Las Vegas, because you just get so much more for your money. And sometimes they even have clients that want to downsize and they want to live in these nicer neighborhoods, but they're like, but we don't need 5,000 square feet. And I'm like, well, that's what you get at that price point. You can't really find a small house in that price point in those neighborhoods for less than, 4,000, 5,000 square feet. So that's a funny thing. All right. So back to these hidden costs. So in addition to HOA fees, whenever you're buying a home, you are going to want to have a home inspector do the home inspection on the house. Now, this is a no-brainer. It's something that me as your agent, I'm going to strongly encourage you to do, is to hire a home inspector. And this is something that you have to pay for out of pocket. It's not included in lender charges. It's not something that the lender is going to quote you, nor will the lender require it. It's totally optional, and it's something that I strongly encourage you to do. A home inspection is going to cost between $350, $500 or so, depending upon the square footage of the house. If you're buying a really big house, you're going to pay a lot more money for that home inspection because they are inspecting the entire thing. So obviously, if it has more square footage, it's going to require them to do a lot more work. But that home inspection is something that is going to save you potentially thousands and thousands of dollars on your home purchase, because that home inspector is going to test everything. We have a lot more videos that go into depth of why you should have a home inspector, but this is definitely something that you need to budget for and you need to plan for whenever you're buying a house. Now, in addition to a home inspector, there's going to be additional inspections that you may want to have done on the home. So for example, I strongly recommend having a termite inspection done. Whenever you work with me as your agent, that is something that I actually cover for you. So that's an expense that you do not have to pay for. And but if you're not working with me, you want to make sure that you have a termite inspection done on your home. That usually costs between $50 or so to have that done. Now, in Georgia, radon is something that is a little bit more prevalent than it is in other parts of the country. Radon is an odorless gas that is emitted from the earth, and it is linked to certain types of cancers. You can mitigate radon and get rid of it out of a house, but this is a testing that you would have to have done, and it's a specialized test. And we see this with more homes here in Georgia on a basement, and that radon test is going to cost you about $125 with a home inspection. So a lot of these home inspection companies also offer radon testing as an add-on service. If you were calling an independent company to come in and do a radon test, you're likely looking at around $200 or so. So you want to make sure that you consider additional inspections that you may want to have done. If you're considering buying an older house, I strongly recommend that you have the home inspector do a sewer scope. This is where they send cameras down into the sewer pipes that's connected to the street. And sometimes those get really clogged up with tree roots and things like that. And they can cause major blockages, and it can cause a lot of damage inside your home and kind of can flood your yard. And it's pretty costly to repair. So a sewer scope, which is around $75, can save you also a ton of money if you are buying an older house. So definitely something that you want to keep in mind for and budget for depending upon the type of the house. Alex, you finally landed a home in Lawrenceville. Congratulations. And it only took you 9 months and 3 buyers' offers to fall. So everything happens for a reason. And I've been in this business long enough to know that you always end up where you're supposed to be. So sometimes it's really heartbreaking whenever you lose out on offers or you lose out on homes, but the right thing always falls through. Alex gives the advice to inspect the chimney and the chimney topper. Yes, home inspectors are not going to inspect the chimney. So if you want a chimney inspection done, that's always something specialized that you're going to have to get a chimney inspector to come out and take a look at it as well. You mentioned to inspect the land and flood zone. So as part of your homeowner's insurance quote, they're going to check to see if it's in a flood zone. Here in Georgia, it's pretty rare to experience a house that's in a flood zone, although it does happen sometimes. But it is pretty rare. And especially if you are getting a house, obviously in other parts of the country, flood zones are much, much more prevalent. But here in the North Metro Atlanta area, our elevation is such that it's very, very rare to have a home in a flood zone. Although I've come across like one out of the past 5 years that has been in a flood zone. Andre said, I've been looking at houses in Swanee. I was shocked they did not have lawn sprinklers. Here in Florida, every house has lawn sprinklers. Is this normal in Georgia? Yes, it is very normal in Georgia. I would say 20% of houses maybe have sprinkler systems. And the reason is that we just have so much more rainfall here in Georgia. Things stay pretty green year round, and it's not necessarily something that is a necessity. Whereas I'm sure in Florida with the heat, the humidity, drought, maybe there's a higher need for having lawn sprinklers to help make sure that your lawn stays nice and green. Yeah, but I would say that it's definitely a little bit more rare here in Georgia. And it's also not uncommon. Even if you do come across a home with a sprinkler and you ask the seller about it, they're going to say, oh, we haven't used that in years. Or we don't even know if it works. We've never used it. That's how it was whenever we bought it from the previous owner. And so also it's just, added expense of an extra water bill that you get that comes along with having sprinklers. And it's just not necessarily something like strongly needed here in Georgia. So I'm imagining that that's why you do not see it as much. And I guess we don't even know to want those because most houses here don't have them. But I love that you brought up that point. All right. So an additional expense that you need to know about when buying a house is an appraisal fee. So this is an expense that is disclosed to you by your lender up front whenever they give you that loan estimate. But this is something that you're going to pay for as a buyer out of pocket in the middle of the transaction. So whenever the lender orders that appraisal, that is when you pay the appraisal fee. Typically, these are going to run around $500. Now, if you are in a scenario where you are wanting to be very competitive with your offer and you're trying to please the seller, there may be scenarios where we try to get an appraisal done very quickly. Now, anytime we do an appraisal very quickly, the appraiser is going to charge a rush fee to do that. Usually that rush fee is going to add an additional $150 to $200 to the cost of that appraisal. And so even though that's an added expense that you're going to pay for, a lot of times if we're in a competitive offer situation, it's money well spent. If a seller is evaluating all the offers and they say, hey, here's kind of like 2 identical offers, but this buyer is going to have the appraisal done in 10 days and we'll know for sure that this home appraises. Whereas this other buyer has an appraisal contingency of like 21 days, which is kind of like the normal standard time frame. So that is something to keep in mind. You're going to pay for that convenience of having it rushed, but there's a lot of good arguments to make as to why that is a good fee to pay. But that's something that you need to know. So when the lender asks you to pay for that appraisal, don't be shocked. You will see a credit for that on the back end whenever you go to closing, but that is something that you need to know about. Escape Route says on Long Island, homes are too cramped together for me, and a lot of people don't take care of their property, so I would like more land. We definitely have a lot of land here in Georgia, and it all depends on what you're looking for. So, um, the common lot size for houses here in Georgia are going to be between a quarter of an acre to point third of an acre, fourth, almost half of an acre. And you can also find plenty of options where you have half of an acre or more, depending upon where you want to be. So that is a great reason for wanting to move and having yard space and having a garden and all those great things that come with having a yard, having a dog, like having a dog that can just go out in the backyard. We have a fenced in backyard for our dogs. We have 3. And I just couldn't imagine not having yard space to be able to, you know, walk out the back door and have your dog be able to go do their business and come right back in. Alex asks, can you explain the appraisal gap situation? Yes, I can. So let's just hypothetically say that you are buying a house for $400,000 and that's what you're under contract for. Let's say it was a very competitive situation and you went in a multiple offer situation, and let's say they had listed the house at 380, but you're under contract for 400. If you were waiving that appraisal gap, what that basically means is that if that home appraises for anything less than 400, you're telling the seller, no problem, I'm going to make up that difference in cash. And what's important is that the bank is not going to loan any more money than what the home is worth. So if there's an appraisal gap of $20,000, or let's just say $10,000, let's say the house appraises at 390, you as the buyer would have to come up with an additional $10,000 to cover that gap to make the lender whole. Now, sometimes that doesn't necessarily mean that you're having to go write a check for an additional $10,000. Sometimes what that means is that maybe they're changing a little bit on the loan side. So let's say that you were putting down 15% down payment. They would take 10,000 of that from the down payment and shift it over to cover that appraisal gap. But maybe instead of a 15% loan to value ratio, now it becomes 10%. So maybe your monthly payment goes up a little bit. So sometimes you can shift some of your down payment funds around to cover that. Now, let's just say that you don't have an appraisal gap and you're paying $400,000 for the house. It was listed for $400,000, but that appraisal comes back at $390,000. So what do? There's a clause in the contract that gives you the right to go back to the seller and say, hey, we're under contract for $400,000. The value came back at $390,000. We've got to come up with a solution. So that solution could be a few things. If you're the buyer, you want that solution to be, let's reduce the price of the house down to $390,000. Here's my amendment to change the price of the house to $390,000. New price. Everyone's happy. Everyone's happy except for the seller, who thought they were getting $10,000 more for the sale of their house, but now they can't. So the seller has the right to say, okay, yes, sure, I agree to that price of $390,000. I'm going to sign that amendment. Or the seller could say, no, I'm not selling the house for that. You can buy it for $400,000 or not. Now, if that was the case, you would have to cover that appraisal gap. You would either have to shift some of your down payment funds, or you would have to add some more money to the down payment funds to keep everything the same. Also, you could say, okay, let's meet in the middle. Let's reduce the price of the house to $395,000 and I'll come out of pocket an additional $5,000, or shift some of those funds over. Like sometimes that happens as well. Now, the seller is kind of weighing how competitive of a situation was this at the house? How much time do they have? Can they afford to go back on the market and find another buyer who potentially won't have an appraisal issue? So those are all the things that a seller is going through whenever they're thinking about what to do with an appraisal difference. And typically, whenever that appraisal comes back, you're kind of like in the middle of the transaction. It's 2 weeks into it. By that time, the seller has started packing up all of their things, and they're like preparing to sell their house in 2 weeks. And so the thought of having to go back on the market and find a new buyer, it's daunting. And a lot of times a seller wants to kind of figure out a win-win solution to get this sold. So it really depends on the situation. But That is something that you need to know. You also ask, like, is that just a condition you have to agree to? It is not something you have to agree to. So if you decided to terminate on that deal because the seller would not reduce the price of the house, you would get your earnest money back and you can go look for a different house. Now, in a competitive situation, in a multiple offer situation where you're going over asking price, if you're the seller, you're saying, hey, great, you offered to pay more for my house than what the market believes it's worth. What are you going to do if the appraiser says it's worth less of what we listed it for? That's great that you want to pay more, but how am I going to be guaranteed that you're going to pay me more? So that's where you see buyers waiving or giving an appraisal gap guarantee. And so you're kind of guaranteeing the seller that if it does appraise for less, because I'm the one pushing the price over, then I'm telling you that I will guarantee you that you're going to get the money that I say that I'm going to give you. So that is something that that you need to know. So my scenario, you were the fourth best offer. 3 buyers fell off. I selected not to change anything, go conventional. 400,000 was my offer. House appraised for 390. The seller changed the price to 390 since they needed to move in a month. Yep. So that's exactly kind of like a scenario where you definitely win, right? Because the seller they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Now, if the seller didn't need to move right away and they had the luxury of going back on the market, they could say, hey, last time we had multiple offers, let me go back on again and see if I can do that again. But the market has really kind of shifted away from that. So sometimes we still see multiple offer situations in certain price points. So Alex, you were looking at a price point that's kind of very competitive. It's where a lot of people are trying to find houses. And so it's not uncommon to find multiple offer situations. But that is fantastic information. And I'm really glad that worked out in your favor, that you were able to get it for $390 and get the seller to negotiate that down. So good job. All right. So the next cost that you need to know about whenever buying a house is property taxes. Now, you might be thinking, like, of course, I know I have to pay property taxes. But one thing you may not know is that you have to pay those property taxes up front. The lender is going to collect prorated property taxes from you up front to create an escrow account so that they can pay your property taxes at the end of the year. So if you're putting down more than 20% on a home, you don't have to escrow the property taxes. The lender is going to say, hey, we trust you at the end of the year. Whenever that property tax bill comes due, you're going to write a check and you're going to pay for it. Now, if you're putting down less than 20%, the lender is going to say, you don't get an option to pay those property taxes on your own. We are going to pay those property taxes because we want to make sure and that we know for certain that the property's taxes get paid for because they don't want your house having a lien or being foreclosed on from the county. So what the lender is going to say is that in addition to your monthly payment, where you're paying the principal and interest every single month, we're going to collect some additional money every single month for your property taxes. And we're going to put that into a separate account called an escrow account so that every single month you're paying a little bit of money into that account. And then at the end of the year, they're going to take all the money from that account and they're going to pay the property taxes. Well, depending upon what time of year you're closing on your house, the property taxes are going to be due very soon. So, for example, if you are buying a house, let's say in September, and the property tax bill is due in December, you would only have made 2 months worth of payment where they were collecting the property taxes. So how are they going to make up that full year's worth of amount of property taxes that are due? Well, they're going to make that up by charging you for that at the very beginning as closing cost whenever you buy your home. So I'm going to show you an example of what this looks like. So give me just a second to pull this up for you. So I actually have a loan estimate from a previous client that kind of demonstrates exactly what this looks like. So waiting on my computer. All right, here we go. So you see underneath column B, this is the loan cost that the lender was actually charging to do the loan. You'll see that they actually have the appraisal at $425. Okay, now go look in column C. And if you go underneath other costs, you're going to see recording fees, state tax stamps. These are Georgia fees that are charged for no matter who, no matter which lender, you always have to pay these fees. So if you skip down to underneath homeowners insurance, you're going to see property taxes of $5,784. That is how much they are collecting in property taxes up front to make sure that there's enough money in that escrow account at the end of the year to pay the property taxes. So that is definitely something that you need to keep in mind and estimate for whenever you are buying a house. So again, if you're just joining us, welcome to the live stream. Let me know where you're watching from. Let me know in the comments. And if you have any questions about the housing market or making a move, make sure that you drop them below. And we're going to answer those as we're talking about these hidden fees whenever you're buying a house. So while we have this up, the other thing that you need to know about is that whenever you buy your home, in closing costs, the lender is going to require you to pay 1 full year's worth of homeowners insurance up front. And so they're going to collect that 1 full year's worth of homeowners insurance up front. And you'll see that this is charged on this lender's loan estimate. If you'll look underneath column C, underneath daily interest, there's homeowners insurance. They have that estimated at $2,400. And they're going to make you pay 1 full year up front. And then they're also going to collect homeowners insurance for the escrow account. So if you'll look just below that again, you're going to see homeowners insurance, and then you're going to see a 3 in the middle. That means they're collecting 3 months worth of homeowners insurance premiums for a total of $600, and they're going to put that into the escrow account. So that is a fee that you have to pay for up front whenever you are buying a house. And this is something the lender is going to require. Now, this does not apply to a house if you are paying cash or if you are sometimes putting down more than 20%, because the lender kind of gives you a little bit more leeway of trusting you that you're going to do what you need to do. But the lender is going to require that you have homeowners insurance because they want to know that if that house burns to the ground, their investment is protected and that there's something in there that's going to recoup that cost. So that is something that you need to know. All right, so let's go back to the comments. I think we have a few more questions. Oh, the seller used a lawyer versus a realtor. Everyone hated the experience. Oh my goodness. So that sounds like you were dealing with maybe a for sale by owner. And gosh, I wonder if that's why they had the 3 transactions that fell through, or the 3 buyers that backed out, because maybe that seller just didn't quite understand or know what he was doing. Oh, we have another New Yorker watching. Lewis from Syracuse, welcome. Thank you for joining us. You are like the 5th New Yorker that we have watching on the live stream tonight. So I appreciate all y'all, as we say down here, watching me from New York. So I hope to help you make a move here to Georgia and give you some really great information. Okay, so going back to the fees, the hidden fees that you're going to have to pay for whenever you buy a house. And that is title or attorney's fees. So in your state, or if you've bought a home in another state before, you may have heard this referred to as title fees. In the state of Georgia, we are a closing attorney state, meaning that instead of having a title company do all of the transaction paperwork, in Georgia, we use closing attorneys that handle all the title work. And just like a title company charges a fee to do their closing attorneys charge a fee here in Georgia to do their thing as well. So I'm going to show you an example of what these title charges and settlement charges look like. And what you'll notice on a lender's loan estimate, let me see if this has it. Okay, yeah. See underneath column B where it says services you can shop for, and it has abstract, exam fee, settlement fee, closing protection letter, lender's title insurance. This is, it says that you can shop for these fees, but I'm going to tell you a secret here in Georgia. Every closing attorney, at least in the metro Atlanta area that I deal with, they all charge about the same fees. And so we're going to go back to, this is like an actual closing settlement statement. You'll see that the settlement fee was $795 for this closing attorney. The lender had estimated $860. Some closing attorneys charge $825, some charge $775, but they're all like within $50 or $60 of each other. So just know that when it says you can shop for them, trust me, you don't want to shop for them. It's going to take hours worth of work all to come to the conclusion that one might be $25 cheaper than the other. And I would strongly recommend using whatever closing attorney your real estate agent recommends. I have a closing attorney that I love to use. And the reason that I love to use them is because if there's a problem Wednesday night at 7 o'clock, I can call the lender or the closing attorney and get them on the phone and say, hey, I need help. Things aren't going right, or I need you to look into this, or help me fix this problem because we're set to close tomorrow and something's not going right. They're going to answer my call because we have that relationship and we do so much business with each other. And if you're choosing a closing attorney to save $25 and I don't have that relationship with them and something goes wrong, I would want to make sure that I can provide a really great experience for you as a client. And most real estate agents want to do the same. So in the state of Georgia, you're going to have attorney's fees. You'll see that referred to here as a settlement statement. You'll see that title exam fee as $250. That is the exact same fee that was disclosed on the lenders. They all charge the same thing. Now, you'll see here that there's lender's title insurance. If you're receiving a loan and you're putting down, if you're doing a loan, the lender is going to require a lender's title insurance policy. That covers the lender. It does not cover you. And so you'll see underneath directly that there's something called the owner's title insurance policy. So a title insurance policy protects you so that if a neighbor comes along or if some long lost relative of the seller who you bought the property from comes through and says, hey, that was my aunt's house. She wasn't supposed to sell it. It really belongs to me, or it was willed to me, and I own this property. That title insurance protects you from that happening, and it provides lawyers and legal fees, and it protects your investment. It says, okay, you've invested $400,000 into this property. If something were to go wrong like this, your investment is still going to be protected. So that lender's title policy insurance protects the lender's money that they have invested into it. The owner's title policy protects your money. If you did not have that owner's title policy insurance and something went wrong, the lender is getting their money. You are SOL, as we say here in Georgia or in the South, meaning shit out of luck. So that is something that you need to be prepared for. And all of these things that we've talked about, with the exception of inspections, are all considered closing cost. So whenever someone refers to, yeah, you have your down payment and you have these closing costs, these are all the fees that make up that closing cost. So definitely something that you need to keep in mind. Oh, we have someone local joining us. Thank you for watching us from Beaufort, Anupam. I hope I said that correctly. And we also have Massachusetts representing here as well tonight on the live stream. So thank you. We've helped a couple of clients from the Massachusetts, Boston area relocate here to Georgia. All right, the last fee that you need to know about, and this is something that I'll be honest with you, I didn't understand that I needed to tell you about this until I had a client recently say, hey, this is weird. I thought this would be included in my taxes, and it's not. And that is trash service. So I guess in other parts of the country, the city or the county collects the trash, and that's included in your property tax fees. In a lot of municipalities in Georgia, in the North Metro Atlanta area, trash service is not covered by your property taxes. You have to pay a separate company to come by and collect your trash. So once a week, they come get all the trash cans and they dispose of your trash for you. Now, the good news is that it's not very expensive. You're talking about $22 a month, $25 a month for trash service. And there's usually several companies that will service an area. So you have some competition, or no one has like a monopoly on the trash service. But this is something that you're going to need to keep in mind, that it's going to be a new monthly expense for you as a homeowner, is paying for trash service, unless you're like my neighbors and you want to take your trash to the trash collection sites around the county, which counties that don't offer those trash services, they do offer trash collection sites throughout the county where you can go drop off your trash. But I don't know about you, but I don't want to drive around with my trash, my garbage from my dishes and all the stuff you throw away every single week, and take that to the trash dump. But they like to do that. So I would much rather pay the $22 a month to have the company come around and collect that every single week. All right, we have someone watching from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. They just moved here 8 months ago, and family was supposed to be able to come, but due to high cost of the beach, they may go back to Augusta, Georgia, which was cheaper. Yeah. So Augusta is a great town, and it is definitely a lot cheaper than the Metro Atlanta area. I actually bought an investment property in Augusta, or the outskirts of Augusta. And so it's definitely a town where you can find some much more affordable housing. And I have an excellent agent partner there. So if you're watching and you're considering the Augusta area, reach out to me and I'll make sure that you're connected with them to make sure that you're in really good hands there in Augusta. But that is definitely an area to consider as well. All right. So trash service. So I'm curious, if you're watching, is trash service included in your fees, in your property taxes that you pay right now, or do you have to pay a separate company to pick up trash like we do here in the Metro Atlanta area of Georgia? I'd like to know that. Answer that question. It's just one of the really fun things about helping so many clients from across the country, is just getting an opportunity to learn that things are done a lot differently throughout the country, and things that I think are normal are not normal. So it's always fun to find out what unique things buyers have learned or think are different about being here in Georgia. So next week, I will not be on the live stream. I'm going to be at a real estate conference, but the following week, make sure that you tune into this live stream. I'm actually going to have some clients that moved here to Georgia 2 years ago, and they've been here for 2 years now. And I'm going to have them on and interview them and share, kind of like get their perspective, and hopefully answer a lot of your questions about what their experience was like moving here to Georgia. So I'm super excited about having them join us on the live stream. So that'll be in 2 weeks. Won't be on next week, but they will be here in 2 weeks. They moved from California. Michelle asked, would you advise renting before buying a home? That is a good question. So, and the answer is complicated. So in a lot of ways, it makes sense to rent because it gives you a chance to learn the area, right? You get a chance to feel like, is this really where I want to be? Or, yeah, and just learn if this is where you want to be. The downside to renting is that you are for sure throwing away that money every single month. You're not getting that money back. It's not being invested in anything. Now, I would advise you of renting if you're very unsure of where you want to be and you have a wide budget, or a budget that would give you lots of different areas to choose from. And the reason I say that is because if you say, yes, I want to move to Georgia, I know from visiting and I know from watching your videos that I want to be in like these 2 specific areas, like this is where I want to be. And if you have a very specific budget, sometimes there's just not a whole lot of houses that are going to fit that budget. And with home prices increasing, sometimes waiting a year to buy a house can change a lot, especially if home prices continue to change or interest rates change and your income doesn't change to reflect those changes. And as we know, a lot of people are dealing with the fact that their income has not kept up with inflation. And so it's a long answer to the question, but I'll give you a story of a client that wanted to buy a specific type of house a couple of years ago, and they decided to go into a rental and wait. Well, a lot changed in the real estate market during that year that they rented. And their income, though, had not changed, and they were no longer able to afford the house that they wanted to buy, whereas a year ago they could. That home that they wanted is now out of their price range, and interest rates have changed. And so it just makes it completely unaffordable to them unless they're willing to go to a completely different area of town or to an entirely new town, and then they could afford that. But they were in a scenario where they had to be in this very specific area. So unfortunately, they're still renting. And this is now going on year 3. And I don't know that their situation has changed where they'll ever be able to afford a house. So that's just really frustrating. But so if you have a very, very specific budget and you know exactly, or you have to be in a specific area, I would strongly encourage you to say, really explore buying first and also explore the pros and cons of renting at the same time. But if you have a flexible budget and have a flexible area of where to be, then I would say it's not a bad idea to rent, because then that gives you an idea to really learn the area and figure out where you want to be, and knowing that you have the flexibility of changing those parameters if you need to by moving to a different area or changing your budget a little bit. So that is my advice on that. In Long Island, the trash service is included. So is street repair, snow plowing. Saw streets that were in bad shape and didn't get these services because they listed private. Interesting. So here in Georgia, all roads are taken care of by the county or the city. Now, the level of which they're taken care of is a whole level different story. You know, you see potholes and stuff like that around. But occasionally you'll see a private road, but that's like in a super exclusive gated private neighborhood, like that type of situation. So that's very interesting. Super Trey said that owned first home in Myrtle Beach back in October. It was $141,000. Now my place is worth $180 to $190. If I sold now, I could find a place in Augusta way cheaper, mortgage and HOA. Yeah. So a good thing about maybe sometimes not renting is even if you buy, and even if it ends up not being exactly what you want it to be, or this is something that you have to understand too, is that your first home is likely not going to be exactly what you want it to be. Sometimes that first house is just getting your entry level foot into the real estate market so that you're owning something, so that you're making those payments that are at a fixed cost and they're not rising like rent rates are, that they're at a fixed cost and you're essentially paying yourself. You're creating equity so that in a couple of years' time, you can sell that house for a profit, take the equity that you're making out of it, and then go buy in the area that you discovered that you wanted to be, or buy up into the next house price level that gives you the more of a house that you actually want. So lots of things to consider there, lots of pros and cons, but there is no right or wrong answer. But I'll be happy to help you explore that if that's something that you decide that you want to talk through. So thank you everyone for joining me on the live stream tonight. I strongly encourage you to join me back here in 2 weeks. I'm going to have the family from California on, answering all of your questions and sharing with you their experience about buying here in Georgia and what it's like 2 years later being here, and answering your kind of questions. And they're going to have a unique perspective that I'm not going to be able to share with you. So I'm excited to have them do that. And if you're just joining us, or if you're seeing me for the first time, I do videos every single Sunday. So if you haven't liked and subscribed to my channel, go ahead and do that right now. You'll see tons of videos on the channel educating you all about moving to the Metro Atlanta area and all throughout Georgia. If you're thinking about making a move and you want to get in contact with me, my information is directly below this video. You can call, you can text, you can email, however you want to get in touch with me. let's connect and let's talk together privately. I'd love to give some guidance to you and your family, and I'd actually love to help you find your house here in Georgia and make that move. So I'm looking forward to connecting with each and every one of you. We have lots of people from New York that are wanting to make the move to Georgia. So I want to help you achieve that. So definitely connect with me, and I look forward to seeing y'all on the live stream in 2 weeks, and of course on the videos that come out every single Sunday. Until next time, I will see y'all later.